Hi, it's Katrina. Number 10. The oldest Buddhist temple. The very first Buddhist temple ever constructed may have just been unearthed in northern Pakistan. The temple was discovered in the Swat Valley, which is part of the ancient Gandhara region that was conquered by Alexander the Great in the 3rd century BC. It was the arrival of the Greeks and Macedonians that spawned a unique mixture of Buddhist belief and Greek artwork. In other words, it was the merging of two very different worlds. You could see Buddhas with Greek columns. Based on what little evidence they have, archaeologists believe the temple was constructed in the middle of the 2nd century BC, when Gandhara was ruled by the Indo-Greek kingdom. But what's fascinating is that researchers found traces of an even older Buddhist temple underneath it, probably from the century before. What that means is that the older temple, which is almost beyond recognition because it's so badly damaged, was constructed just shortly after the death of the Buddha. It's believed he died around 483 BC. This discovery is like finding the very first church built after the death of Jesus Christ. It's shocking, but hasn't been 100% confirmed. All archaeologists know now as they excavate the remains of the temple is that it is very, very old. Who built it and why they chose this particular place is a complete mystery. Number 9. The first shipyard. Marine archaeologists have made an unbelievable discovery off the coast of England. They have just identified a shipyard 8,000 years old, which they believe to be the first of its kind anywhere on the planet. They discovered a huge number of timber boards sitting on the floor of the ocean, which were likely once part of a platform. The submerged structure had almost definitely been part of a primitive port. The discovery is thanks to expert divers with the Maritime Archaeology Trust. They were searching along the submerged landscape at Boldnor Cliff, what was once a valley populated by Stone Age humans, but is now over 30 feet underwater. There are no less than 5 archaeological sites in this one region. This was once part of the landmass which connected the island of Great Britain to the continent of Europe. It was home to all kinds of Stone Age settlers who had to flee when the ocean levels rose and their homes were swallowed and submerged. But by far, the most interesting discovery has been that of the shipyard. DNA analysis of the wooden material proved it to be the oldest boat-building site ever discovered. And because the tide is constantly shifting and what is visible at the bottom of the ocean is always changing, each year brings something new. The most recent season helped divers uncover over 60 pieces of trimmed timbers that had once been part of the shipyard. To have something dating back 8,000 years ago is impressive in itself, but to have remnants of wood used by ancient people dating back that much is almost a miracle. Number 8. The first common currency. Archaeologists appear to finally agree on the first common currency used in Europe. As it turns out, the very first standardized form of currency used across the American continent 5,000 years ago came in 3 forms. People used rings, bangles, and the blades of axes as the earliest forms of cash. These things were standardized by both shape and weight and accepted as tangible currency anywhere goods could be purchased. At least this is what researchers at Leiden University have confirmed. The Dutch researchers looked at over 5,000 axe blades and rings from around the year 2150 to 1700 BC. That's around 450 years, with the artifacts being taken from Germany to Scandinavia. Researchers uncovered not just single objects, but whole hordes of these scraps that had been buried by people trying to protect their wealth. What the study found was that regardless of region or time, each axe blade and bangle were almost identical in weight, shape, and size. 70% of the rings weighed roughly 195 grams. It was a remarkable achievement by primitive humans, considering they didn't even have any proper measurement system to make their currency uniform. This displays one of the most significant advancements in human intellect in our history, and it was undoubtedly the first step towards a global economy. Number 7. The Pessie Canoe. The Pessie Canoe is considered to be the oldest boat in the world. There could have been an older boat made, but if there was, scientists haven't found it yet. Carbon dating has placed the canoe as being crafted sometime between 8040 BC and 7510 BC. This was a time when human beings were still hunter-gatherers, not living in major settlements and preferring to wander around the land hunting and surviving. It was also around the time that humans learned how to make sharper and more intricate tools out of stone, specifically things like knives, arrowheads, and axes. The canoe was discovered during the construction of a motorway in the Netherlands back in 1955 near the village of Pesse. That's actually how it got its name. One of the local workers noticed it sticking out from the remnant of an old tree, and it was salvaged and brought to the University of Groningen. Once there, the Pesse canoe was freeze-dried to keep it from deteriorating. The canoe is just about 10 feet long, carved in the shape of a small boat. It was undoubtedly used for floating around on lakes or down rivers, but probably not for the open ocean. We don't know which culture is responsible for its creation, or if it was used primarily as a fishing vessel. We do know it was made out of a single Scots pine log, the same type of wood used by later civilizations to create dugout canoes. But perhaps the biggest mystery is that a very similar canoe, the second oldest boat ever discovered, was found several thousand miles away near the Dufuna village of Nigeria. Nobody has ever been able to make a clear connection between the two, although they are nearly identical and made 2,000 years apart. That's amazing! Do you have any ideas about what the connection could be? Share your ideas in the comments. Number 6. Babylonian Map of the World. For all you cartographer fans out there, let's take a look at the very first map ever made. It's the Babylonian Map of the World, drawn on a tablet and inscribed in cuneiform script. It shows Mesopotamia as being the entire world, with Babylon at its center. The middle area of the map is completely ringed by a waterway called the Salt Sea. The outer area, beyond the Salt Sea, is divided into 8 specific regions. Each of these regions is described on the same tablet as being a place of horrible monsters, mythical beasts, and great, powerful heroes. It seems that the Babylonians believed that once you crossed over the Great Salty Sea, you wound up in unknown lands of horror and mystery. It's all quite exciting and must have felt even more exciting for the ancient Mesopotamians. They believed themselves to be the center of the world, surrounded by gods and beasts and mythical lands. The map is not only proof of this fantasy world they lived in, but the first serious example of geography. Not every place appears to be in its correct position, but this is the earliest example of a map, created in Babylon around 3,000 years ago. What do you think it was like believing the world was riddled with monsters and mythical realms? Living in the past seems to have been quite scary. Let me know in the comments. Number 5. The first ear surgery. The earliest evidence of ear surgery goes back 5,300 years. A team of researchers at the University of Valladolid in Spain discovered the very first known surgical operation performed on a person's ear. The discovery came from a human skull found at a dig site called the Dolmen of El Pendonis. Previous research showed that it was used as a funerary complex around the year 3800 BC, then continuously for about 800 years. Primitive humans used the site as a mass graveyard. When researchers took the skull out of the ground and decided to analyze it, they came across something unbelievable. The skull showed evidence of surgery. It looks like the patient, a woman around the age of 35, had a mastoidectomy. This is still a procedure done today to clean out the area in the skull behind a person's ear after it's become infected. If the infection isn't cleaned, a person can go deaf or die. This woman had the procedure done in both her ears. Whatever the infection was, it must have caused her incredible pain because the surgery would have been brutal. A doctor from the Stone Age used a primitive implement, probably made from flint, to puncture the skull and remove the infected cells. How did they even know what they were doing? Do you think this was ancient medicine or torture? Let me know in the comments. Number 4. The first city. If you've ever laid in bed at night and wondered what the very first city on Earth was, I have some excellent news for you. The very first city that fits every official definition of a city is called Uruk, and it was first settled around the year 4500 BC in Mesopotamia. It's important to note that there were other settlements before Uruk. Jericho, Eridu, and Sidon were all inhabited before Uruk, but they never managed to reach the status of a city. Uruk was the first one to create a stable social hierarchy, a political structure, monumental architecture, and much more. Writing, literature, religion, specialized jobs, everything that makes a city happened here first. One or two of these things certainly happened in other places, but they all happened collectively in Uruk. This led to a massive population boom, towering walls to protect against invaders, and agricultural production along the outskirts of the city walls. We don't know how many people lived in Uruk, but most historians agree it was more than anywhere else in the ancient world at the time. Word of prosperity spread, and people from the country began moving to Uruk in droves until the city was practically bursting. Why do you think people were attracted to city life back in the day? Which do you prefer, the city or the country? Let me know in the comments below. Number 3. The Blombos Cave Rock Art. The Blombos Cave is a limestone cavern in Africa where the earliest known prehistoric art was discovered. The cave is located about 300 feet from the ocean and 180 miles away from Cape Town. The prehistoric rock engravings that were uncovered in its dark chambers have been dated back to around the year 70,000 BC. The oldest piece consists of a pair of broken ochre rocks carved with abstract symbols and geometric patterns. Additionally, somebody made a necklace out of shells. The next oldest example of cave art is at the El Castillo Cave in Spain, where paintings were drawn 30,000 years later. The Blombos cave art also predates anything similar in Europe by roughly 50,000 years. Even more incredible is that archaeologists also found some of the oldest bone tools in Africa here. They uncovered implements crafted from polished animal bones that date back over 80,000 years. Humans weren't even real humans back then. Have you ever been to a cave with prehistoric art? What was your experience like? Number 2. The Persian Canaan. The Persian Canaan was the world's first irrigation system in Iran and throughout other Middle Eastern regions thousands of years ago. The technique involved digging a very long tunnel through dry land to allow water stored in an underground aquifer to spill down into the soil, creating less hostile conditions. Many parts of ancient Persia were desolate, barren, and infertile. The only way to support a huge population and to continue thriving in their great cities was to invent the world's first method of irrigation. The way the Canaan worked was by digging a well deep at the top of an elevation. They would dig until they hit the water table, then create an artificial water channel to carry the life-giving liquid down the slope to the land that needed to be irrigated. The water was then moved via a network of dams, gates, and other channels to be distributed as needed. This is amazing because the whole thing was powered by gravity and provided both drinking water and fresh crops for the Persians. It was ingenious, a truly brilliant invention that pushed humanity one big step forward. And even though the Persians were the first to do it, they weren't the only ones who figured it out. Today, there are tens of thousands of Canaans, although under different names, preserved in about 35 countries. Pretty impressive, right? Number 1. Tools older than man. Remember the old bone tools I told you about from Africa? The tools that were 80,000 years old? That's pretty significant. But did you know that the oldest tools ever found are 3.3 million years old? It's true. They're called the Lomekwi tools, and they were found at an excavation site in Kenya. It's especially amazing because nobody knows exactly what the tools were used for. What we know is that somebody, not a human though, as humans hadn't evolved yet, sat down and started chipping away at a rock. They chipped and shaped the rock until it fit snugly in their hand and could be used to prepare meat or crack open nuts. It was a technological advancement that predates humanity. The tools were discovered in a dried riverbed, a small collection of cutting instruments and hammers. They are so old that they beat the previous oldest tools by 700,000 years. Jason Lewis from Rutgers University says the discovery has challenged the idea that human characteristics evolved with us near our origins. By that he means the making of tools, the consumption of meat, and the invention of language. Because these tools are so old, it's clear some unknown distant human ancestors had figured out how to shape rocks to be useful. It happened way, way before us. Thanks for watching! What's the coolest world first that you saw today? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and remember to subscribe if you haven't already. We've got lots more videos about amazing discoveries coming up.